mid-40s, 1940s, there was an article in the Reader's Digest entitled "That Happened on a Brooklyn Subway." The story goes something like this. There was a man by the name of Marcel Sternberger who was in the Brooklyn borough of New York, and he went to visit a friend of his who was sick. Having never been to this particular section of town, he, by necessity, needed to get on a subway train he had never been on before. Being the lunch hour, Marcel Sternberger entered the train to find that it was quite crowded, but as he immediately entered the train, a man got up from his seat to get off, and he immediately replaced the man. There, on the bench next to him, was a Hungarian man who was reading a Hungarian newspaper. Curious as to what this man was doing, Sternberger asked him, "What, sir, are you doing?" He says, "I'm looking for my wife." He says, "You're looking for a wife?" He says, "No, I'm looking for my wife." "In a Hungarian newspaper, can you explain?" He said, "During the war, I lived in a town called Debrecen. I was conscripted by the Russians to leave Hungary to bury dead Germans. In my absence, my wife was taken to a concentration camp where I'm hoping against hope she was rescued by the Allies, and by some strange reason, I may find her here in the States." Sternberger listened to the man's story, and suddenly something came to his remembrance. He had had a conversation with a woman some weeks previous from Debrecen, whose husband was conscripted by the Russians to bury dead Germans. He seems to also remember that this woman was taken to a concentration camp, was liberated by the Allies, and had now come to the States. He said to the man, "Could you tell me your wife's name?" And he says, "My wife's name is Maria Paskin." Maria Paskin, the very name that Sternberger had written on a note in his pocket, accompanied with a phone number, for he thought to himself, "I may call this woman to hear more of her story." Sternberger looked at the Hungarian man and said, "I'm getting off at the next stop. I want to encourage you to do the same. I want you to follow me. It's very important." The train came to a stop. Sternberger and the Hungarian man left the train. He told the man to stand there against the wall, and Sternberger went over to a phone. He dialed Maria Paskin. It rang, and it rang. And finally, a feeble voice answered the phone. "Hello?" He said, "Ma'am, is this Maria Paskin?" She said, "It is." "Well, this is Marcel Sternberger. We met some weeks ago, if you'll recall." She says, "Yes, I remember you, sir." He says, "Could you tell me the name of your husband?" She said, "My husband's name is Bela Paskin." Sternberger looked over at the man, waved him near. He told the woman on the phone, he said, "Maria, you're about to experience the greatest miracle you'll ever experience in your life." And he handed the phone to her husband. He said hello and heard her voice. All Sternberger could hear was the sobbing of a man crying out in between sobs and uttering the name Maria, Maria, Maria. The Reader's Digest article closes with this sentiment: if you are a skeptic, you have to believe that this story was simply by chance. Was it by chance that Marcel Sternberger decided to visit that sick woman in that borough that day? Was it by chance he got on that particular train? And was it by chance that that man got up from his seat at the exact particular time for Sternberger to sit down? Was it a chance that Sternberger also spoke Hungarian? And was it a chance he had already met Maria Paskin at a cocktail party? I say this before I get into the message this morning because I want to say to you, in case you've forgotten, in case you need to be reminded, there is a specific calling on your life. There is a sovereign God watching over your coming in and your going out. There are things that will happen in your life that are of a necessity for Him to move you where you need to be moved, to do what you need to do, to meet who you need to meet. And it is a good reminder this morning that we do not just attend a church for attendance sake. We attend a church, hopefully a ministry, whereby what is said, what is done, what is read, what is studied, what is preached, enhances the process of your daily walk with Christ, who watches you and not by chance has a plan for your life. God can put any two people together on the globe at any second he wants to. And you were brought here this morning for a distinct and specific purpose, as you would be for any morning, any night, and any afternoon. I say that in the context of talking about the human heart and what is in your heart this morning. One of the single most important subjects that can be covered in this culture at this day and in this time. I encourage you, please, to turn in your Old Testament to 1 Samuel chapter 9. Specifically, we'll be looking at verse 19. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 19. In this series entitled Kings, we hope to grow as men and as women by looking at a tall man, a short man, and a wise man. King Saul, King David, and King Solomon. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 19 reads like this. The context is this: Saul is chasing donkeys around the countryside, wayward donkeys who have left his father's farm. He is in looking for a prophet, a seer, someone who sees, who can tell him perhaps where these donkeys may be. Samuel has already been told that Saul will be the next king of Israel, and the encounter goes something like this. Samuel says, "I am the seer," Samuel replied. Speaking to Saul, he says, "Go up ahead of me to the high place, for today you are to eat with me. And in the morning I will send you on your way and will tell you all that is in your heart." I'm sitting with about 6 or 7 men last Tuesday reading this passage at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it dawns on me that there's something quite strange about this sentence. There's something that cannot be, should not be overlooked. It's this particular part. "And in the morning I will send you on your way and will tell you all that is in your heart." It begs the question, why would someone need to tell me what is in my heart? I noted that, as did the men with me. So let's set it up. Let's break it down. The word seer, where we get overseer, one who sees things. It's also a name for a prophet, which is Samuel. So the seer, the prophet, is telling Samuel, "Go up ahead of me to the high place." What's the high place? The high place in the Bible is usually a place of worship, be it a pagan god or Yahweh himself. Even today on Mount Carmel, the international headquarters for the Baha'i faith is on Mount Carmel. Demonic things happen in high places. Holy things happen in high places. Men throughout antiquity have been wanting to worship or feel they get closer to God in high places. The Samuel is saying to him, "Come, I'm the seer. Come with me. I want to tell you something in this high place where you can hear from God." And then he says, "You're going to eat with me." Why do we eat together in the Bible? We eat together in the Bible to make a statement that if you eat with me, we're in alliance with one another. We have a friendship with one another. We're going to work something out. This is more than a casual meal. A meal has meaning. So I'm going to sit down and talk to you about something specifically on this high place where we can hear from God. We're going to break a meal together, and I'm going to share something that's in your heart. This is interesting. And then he says, "You are to eat with me, and in the morning I will send you on your way." In the morning. Listen, you might be here this afternoon or this morning. Listen to me now. Some of you have forgotten this, and others of you perhaps have never known this. This is quite important. In the morning. God is forever telling people in darkness, "Joy cometh in the morning." I don't know how down you may be. I don't know how scared you may be. I don't know how desperate you may be. I don't know how dark and how shadowy and how dim your future looks. There always is a morning. Lamentations 3:22 and 23 says, "It is not of the Lord's mercies that we're not consumed. Because his compassions fail not, they are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness." Lamentations was written by Jeremiah, the weeping, depressed, bipolar prophet. And he was describing Jerusalem under siege, where women were literally eating the dead, specifically their children, to survive. I cannot think of a more barbaric, darker, hopeless, more discouraging time than Lamentations. To lament, it means. And God, they say God's mercies are new every morning. There's always a morning, friend. Joy cometh in the morning, Psalm 30, verse 5. There's always a morning. I don't know how dark a valley you may be in. I don't know what kind of shadow has befallen you, but there is always a morning. And Samuel is saying to Saul, come up to this high place. We'll break bread together. We'll figure this thing out. And by the way, I'm going to tell you what's in your heart. That is weird to me. I will send you on your way and tell you what is in your heart. Why would anyone want to tell someone else what is in their heart? What is the need for that? That never would cross my mind. Why would I walk up to someone in this congregation? I said, listen, come with me tomorrow. We're going to have lunch. I want to tell you what's in your heart. It's not my place to tell you what's in your heart. I don't know where the seer is coming from. I don't know what he's thinking. It's interesting, is it not? Why would Saul need someone to tell what's in his heart? Why would I need someone to tell me or you what's in your heart? It seems like we should have an idea what that is. Apparently not. Maybe Saul needs clarification. Maybe Saul needs someone else to discuss over a meal what's going on in his heart so that he can actually be aware of what's going on. That is to say, you might not be aware of what's going on in your heart this morning. I guess I might not be aware of what's going on in my heart this morning. Maybe we do need someone else beyond us to help us ascertain what's going on in our heart. This is interesting to me. Maybe Saul has no idea whatsoever. Not only does he not need only clarification, he needs, like from the beginning, I have no idea what's going on in my heart. Maybe you don't know what's going on in your heart today. Maybe he really needs to know. By the way, how could anyone, these are the questions I ask when I read this, how can anyone not know what's going on in their heart? Is that possible? Or is it probable? Or one or the other? Listen, can we cover up what's been placed in our hearts so we no longer recognize what it is? Is there something buried in the backyard of your heart this morning that you've forgotten about? Is there something in your heart today that you've not forgotten about, but you've created this incredible, incredible ability to deny its existence? Or you've so redefined it, you can no longer see it for what it really is? What's in your heart today? What's in your heart? Can we forget what's been placed within our hearts? Can we become so distracted, so amused, so tired, so predictable, so monotonous a life that we've forgotten what was placed in our heart back in our 20s and our 30s and our 40s and our 50s and our 60s? Do you and I really know what's in our hearts? What is in our hearts that is good? I mean, really good. And what's in our hearts today that is not so good? These are the questions I posed to you this morning. Let's talk about possible not so good contents. Sometimes we don't want to look at the not so good in our hearts, and we need another person to help us. One of the men Tuesday morning said, I hit on this subject a few years back. He said, I got into this thing where I started asking God what's in my heart, and I started asking God to give me eyes to see what's in my heart. He goes, I couldn't take it. After 2 days, I had enough. I thought, wow, that doesn't sound too inviting. I mean, some people say this sometimes. They say, if you ever standing in front of God, can you ever think about what's the number one question you would ask him? I'm not afraid of coming up with a question to ask God. I'll tell you what I'm more afraid of. What one question he might ask me. See, he can see slap dab right into my heart. He can see what's in every chamber of my heart. He knows exactly what it is. He sees it. I'm not saying he judges me for it, but I bet he sees more about what's in my heart than I'm willing to see on my own. If you look down in your heart, what might you be afraid to see? A little bit of resentment? Anger? Anybody got any prejudice down in there? Racism. If some of us are honest, what's in there? Not sure I want to look. Maybe I do need someone else to tell me what's in my heart. Hey, what are we not capable of, by the way? You know that prisons are full of people who have done heinous crimes that they never set out to do? It's amazing what we're capable of as human beings. At any given moment, are we not capable of doing any given thing? It comes down to this. A teenager asked me the other day something along these lines. If I really get serious about following the Lord, will everything in my life get better? I thought, what a question. And the answer is no. Let me explain. It starts in the middle. There's something down in there called the inner man, the inner woman, the inner being, the Bible calls it. And when you start to follow the Lord, that inner man begins stronger and stronger and stronger, wiser and wiser and wiser, more resolute, more confident, more faithful, more determined, more passionate, more patient, more loving, more kind, more gentle. As that inner man starts to grow, the pressure inside pushing out is greater than the pressure outside pushing in. And you can withstand things like temptation, ridicule, lust of the flesh. You can begin to walk with an assurance, not an insecurity, but a confidence, a faith, not a haughtiness, but a trust, an abandonment that says, me and my inner man are stronger than conforming to the patterns of this world. Now, things might get better outside, and the inner man who's strong and mature and in the Word and worship won't get haughty about it. They'll be more grateful for the blessings they have. A strong inner man or a strong inner woman who's walking in Christ, who's seeking the Lord, who's, as we said, at the center of our life. We sang it this morning. Yes, he's the center of our life, and the inner man. When things fall apart on the outside, we don't fall apart on the inside. That's maturity. But every now and again, the testing will come, and the pressure on the outside will far exceed the pressure on the inside, and what's in our heart gets revealed. Anger, jealousy, envy, rage, panic, fear, trepidation, sarcasm comes out of our heart. Yeah, there's some things in our heart that are more symptoms than causes. There are things down in our heart that if we actually pulled back the veil and looked at it for what it really is and honestly embraced what it really is. I'm a jealous person. I'm an insecure person. I'm a bitter, resentful person. I've got that in my heart. It's rooted and established in there. If I see it for what it really is, then I have to reconcile to the fact that it's causing something on the outside, causing me to act a certain way, be a certain person, be who I'm not, hurt other people, alienate other people, put other people down. Whatever the case may be, when you pull back that heart, oh my gosh, comes with it some responsibility to acknowledge it. Now I'm going to say this. We have these blind spots that we don't want to see what's in our heart, and sometimes we need some seer named Samuel to tell us what's in there, so that we know how to handle it and how to navigate the future. Saul needed another to reveal what was in his heart because he had no direct connection with God. He had to go to the person on the high place who had a connection with God to tell him. Said another way, in our day and age, the worse connection we have with God, the more ignorant we are of what's actually in our heart. Saul's heart was full of fear. The insecurity that forced him to hide among the supplies when he needed to come out and lead his people. The jealousy towards David, because David slain tens of thousands. The worry and the anxiety and the paranoia that was in his heart was insurmountable to him. Thinking that his armor, the very armor that he loaned to David to kill Goliath, that very armor was a symbol of how he covered everything up in his life and denied its existence, but outwardly acted as though these symptoms deep down in the root of his heart were coming out and causing all kind of problems in his life. Yes, we need to see what's in our heart, though we don't want to. We reinforce the negative things in our heart, and I'll tell you how we do it. We become professional storytellers. You want to tell a story of how you came up and you were hurt and you were alienated and you had a terrible parent and you were lost, you were left on a doorstep, you were impoverished, all this stuff that happened to us, and it's deeply painful and it's deeply personal. I got an idea for you this morning. Every time you tell that story, you further solidify what's in your heart. As black as coal as it might be, that story was then, that's not now. I encourage you to change your story. Don't change the truth, change the story. The story is no longer I'm the victim and this is the way I am and my relationships stink because of this and my marriages fall apart because of that and so-and-so's to blame for my lot in life and so-and-so hurt me and so-and-so betrayed me and so-and-so committed adultery and so-and-so robbed me and so-and-so stole me blind. Change the story. Peel that heart back real quick and see that black stone in there and then say this. These things happen to me, but I tell you, it's made me a better person. I'm stronger as a result. I'm more kind, more loving, more giving, more generous. I'm taking these things that happen to me, and I'm helping those who are struggling with the very same issue. I'm changing my story from a rotten, stinking lot in life to an opportunity to minister the love and the grace and the glory of God. I'm taking what happened to me, and I'm changing it into something that's going to bring that black stone to a brilliant white. I'll never be afraid to open my heart again. I wear the badges, and I wear the stripes of an abused past, but I'm telling you what, I'm going to use it for the glory of God. I'm going to use whatever experience I have. Sometimes you don't want to look into your heart for fear what you'll see. But when you look in there and you see what it really is, use it and change it for the glory of God. He'll honor it, He'll bless it, and He'll heal you from the inside out. Amen and amen. Change your stinking story. Have you ever noticed that wherever you go, you're always with yourself? I can't think of a place I've ever gone where I haven't turned around and I'm there with me. And so too is what I repeat to myself constantly in my mind and heart. This is the way I am, and this is the way I turned out, and this has happened here, and so-and-so, so-and-so. Change the story. You might find that your emotions, your mind, your will, and your heart catch up to it when they start to say, yeah, those things happen, but for crying out loud, do I have to keep rehearsing them my whole entire life? Freedom isn't in heaven. That's not where the freedom is. Eternal life is now. Get the freedom now so the remaining time you have, you can be a blessing to others. Not only do I have these things in my heart, sometimes someone needs to sit down and share with me. Have you ever taken a look at this? But there also are good things in our heart. Really good things. Really noble things. Beautiful things. They get covered over by distraction and seasons of life and doing this and doing that and working here and working that. We cover them up, and sometimes that beautiful, beautiful dream that was planted in our heart got covered up by a bunch of nonsense. And you got to go back and you got to get the broom out in your heart and dust that off to see the shine that was on that dream you had one time that you've never seen come to fulfillment. That dream, that goal, that ministry, that book you were going to write, that song you were going to write, that song you were going to sing, that place you were going to travel to, that person you're going to reach with the gospel. What happened to those things? They get covered up in daily monotony. And they hang in the back room of a museum collecting dust for no one to see and no one to appreciate. You remember when you were young and passionate and the Lord knocked you upside the head, said you're going to be a world changer? What happened to that? That longing for God and that zeal and that passion that was in your heart. How did it get covered up? It's a beautiful, noble, pristine, incredibly exciting passion. Where did it go? It's still in your heart, covered over with blame and rationalization and time gone by. No excuse. No excuse. If it was given to you by God, you were to be a steward of it. Bring it back out of the supply room. Bring it out into the showroom. Let's take it out for a spin. Let's change our story, and let's accomplish what that was, whatever it was. That longing to see another come to Christ. I've searched my heart. You know, one of the things I've forgotten is in my heart. I've let others things crowd in there. There's something about that. I don't know what it is. I can't explain it. There's something about that minute and a half to 2 minutes, that 5-minute window when you're talking to somebody and you're leading them to Christ. And you're witnessing a transformation of a way people are looking at God, life, everything. And sometimes the tears flow, or they just relax for the first time in decades, and all of a sudden they say, yes, I need this Christ. That turns my heart on, man. That's in my heart. I've got to remember that. I can't let the dust form on that. The love of God and love of others, that's in our heart. Some years ago, I put together this outreach at Stone Mountain Park in Atlanta, Georgia, where, I don't know, thousands of teenagers came to this thing. I had like 30 Christian bands. I had guest speakers. One of the guest speakers was Jim Bakker. He had since got out of prison, and he had written a book called I Was Wrong. He and I kind of formed a professional relationship, and I asked him to speak at this event. I had no idea. The teenagers flocked from everywhere to come hear this guy speak, because he was talking about grace. They needed to hear it. But rewind about 20 years, he would go to book conventions, and his publisher would put there 2 chairs with gold on them. And he and his wife would sit up in these chairs almost like a throne, and people would wait an hour or so to come by and just shake his hand and have a 2-minute visit with him and buy his book. It was just awkward. It was uncomfortable. There was just something wasn't right about it. This guy had gone the wrong direction in Christ. He had betrayed people's trust. His immoral fall and his mishandling of money was a horrible thing that happened to him, and it ended him up in prison. He went from one of the most beloved and influential televangelists in the country to a dude in prison wearing overalls one day in a toilet. His job that day was to mop the toilet, scrub the grout. Mop the toilets, scrub the grout, scrub the toilets with his overalls on, sloshing water and grime coming off the grout, bleach getting on his overalls, wallowing in his misery. Prison toilet duty. Knock on the door, and guard entered the bathroom and said, Bakker, there's someone here to see you. He goes, I don't want to see anybody. Please, just tell him to go away. Bakker looked at the guard, and by the expression on his face, he knew that maybe this was something he needed to do. The guard said, no, you really do need to see this particular person. Come on. And Bakker didn't want to change clothes. He just leaned his mop up there against the wall, and he walked out into the guest visitor arrival room and stood there in his overalls like a pitiful, miserable, despised preacher he was. There, standing in front of him, was a man in a suit and a tie, tall man, by the name of Billy Graham. Graham made his way towards him and put his arms out like this, and Bakker fell into his arms and just fell limp and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. As Graham just repeated, I love you, I love you, I love you. The single most despicable, immoral hypocrite on the face of the earth in his own mind was being embraced by the most respected minister on earth. And he pulled open his heart and looked in there and saw that darkness, but at the same time, you can't deny that I love you, I love you, I love you, is a love that keeps no record of wrongs, a love that is patient and kind, and it does not envy. Bakker made it out. What he's doing now, I don't know. But we have to look at the good in our heart, and we have to use it. We have to be good stewards. We have to share it. We have to demonstrate it. You know, I think we need people to tell us what's in our heart, because we don't like looking at the black stuff. But we also need people to tell us when it's in our heart, because we have forgotten the good stuff. Use it or lose it. What's in your heart today? And what is it you're keeping to yourself? And what story do you need to tell in a different fashion? Getting in touch with what is in your heart releases you into a movement of God for your personal life. Getting in touch with what's in your heart releases you into a movement of God for your family. 1 Samuel 2:35, I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his priestly house, and they will minister before my anointed one always. God is looking for a faithful priest who will do according to what is in God's heart and mind. A man who's willing to look into his own heart. Now listen to this, Saul wasn't that man. But we refer to David, even as late as Acts 13 and 22. After removing Saul, he made David their king. God testified concerning him, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. How is your heart like that of God's? And when it's not, how do we change it? And when it is, how do we share it? And how do we pursue after that? I want to encourage you this week to do something that maybe you haven't done in a long, long time. Forget returning the phone calls. Put the emails aside for an afternoon. Here's something. Please don't fire me today. Turn off your cell phone for 24 hours. And go write down in a little journal somewhere, what is actually in my heart? What is in my heart? My wife shared with me a passage from Job 37 when it snowed. And the essence is that God allows snow to slow us down. Slow down and get in touch with what's in your heart. Now, if you can look all day long and all night long and every morning long. If you're looking for Christ and he's not in your heart, that's a problem. God's not interested in being on your mind. God's really not interested in being on your heart. He is extremely interested in being in your mind, and he's very passionate about being in your heart. If you've never accepted Jesus Christ before, you can search your heart all day long. You'll not find him. He doesn't need to just be in your mind. He needs to be in your heart. And he doesn't enter your heart except by invitation. By invitation. There was once a beggar sat on the street corner on a daily basis. And a rich man's son would frequent that corner, and every now and again he'd give him some money and some food to eat. One day the son was doing some art and talking about art, and the beggar said, I can draw. So the beggar sat down one afternoon, and he drew a portrait of the rich man's son. And he gave it to him as a gift. It's all he had. It's all he had to give in repayment for the many donations and the time that he spent with him. The beggar just handed him this portrait. Eventually, days went by and turned into weeks and months, years, and the beggar hadn't seen the boy in a long, long time, but got word that he had died. And not only had he died, but his father soon died thereafter. And he always wondered what the boy did with that portrait he gave him. The old hobo got himself together one day and looked the best he could, and he went to an auction where all the boy's art was going to be put on display. And the auctioneer got up there the first time, and he said, okay, the first piece that we're going to auction is this portrait. The hobo looked up there in the front, and he saw the very portrait that he made on the street corner. Oh my gosh, he felt so good. Didn't tell anybody. He says, can we start the bidding with this? And everyone in the room looked at it like, who would bid on that? Who would bid on that? So the hobo did the only thing he could do. He just raised his hand in the back. He had a few coins and he made a bid, and he ended up with his own portrait back. So they went on to the next piece of art. Now the people are getting ready to bid on the real art. And the auctioneer says, it was the provision of those whose artwork is on display here today that he who bid on the son's artwork would be the sole recipient of all other pieces of art in the auction. This auction is closed. If you keep your eye on the son, if you keep your eye on the artwork of the son, you get the whole collection. Make sure, as you search your heart this week, that this Jesus who is the Christ is in the center of it. And I'll tell you what, he'll help you change your story. To take the darkest, blackest stones and turn them into the brilliance of the glory of the risen King in your life. Perhaps this week, you need a person to tell you what's in your heart so you can respond accordingly. Think about this.